Good Tuesday afternoon to you. Hope your day's off to a great start. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, Sam Amico from hoopswire.com will join us. We'll talk Cavs, what he's hearing about the third pick, and also are the Cavs involved in any trade talks. But we begin by talking Browns football. Training camp gets underway tomorrow for the Browns. No fans allowed until Friday, but they will have a full squad workout. Everybody out in Berea. And we are pleased to be joined by Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. So, Dan, the good news comes out. No players for the Browns on the physically unable to perform list. That means everybody's good to go for training camp. How important is that?
I mean, it's huge to have the full squad together to not really start your year with any bad news. You know, there was the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah news, which I know we'll get to later, but just to have the healthy guys to know that Odell Beckham is good to go, Grant Delpit good to go, Greedy Williams good to go. It's just really encouraging to know that they're not going to have to start camp one way without some key players and then have to work them in. They're going to be ready to go day one.
And, you know, it's interesting. You mentioned that. We kind of glossed over how banged up the team was a season ago. When you think Greedy Williams, Delpit, Beckham missed pretty much, you know, almost the entire year. So those are guys that are figuring to be starters or at least major contributors.
Right, and then you factor in Myles Garrett, who got COVID and wasn't the same player. Even, you know, Kaderil Hodge, who won the third receiver job. He kind of was in and out of the lineup with some hamstring injuries, and I think they had plans for him. You lost JoJo Natson. I know that's not a big name, but that's still a guy that, you know, you were trying to do a few things with offensively. He was supposed to bring some life to your kick return game. So to be able to start off healthy, and this is a smart group, so they're going to make sure they keep these guys healthy. There's some injuries you can't avoid, but they're going to make sure you don't get a bunch of hamstring pulls. They're going to be cautious with the guys. They're going to take it easy because the goal is to have as many guys healthy, you know, in December and January, not necessarily, you know, put them through the ringer here in the next couple months. You want to make sure guys can stay healthy as long as possible.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting in some of the rookie camps and offseason, we heard the players come out and say, we know that Kevin Stefanski and the staff isn't going to beat us up, which is, it's kind of interesting to hear. We mentioned Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah on the COVID-19 reserved restricted list, however you want to put it. If he, in fact, is one of those guys that can't practice for 10 days, how do you make that up at the beginning of training camp?
I think it's really challenging. I think for rookies especially, when you have something like this that keeps you away from practice, I think it's really tough to catch up. And I think, you know, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, luckily he was there all spring, starting in rookie minicamp and through OTAs, through mandatory minicamp. So he's got all of that. You know, he'll be able to at least work out. He said he didn't have any symptoms, so he's going to be able to at least work out on his own and stay in shape. But you do miss something, especially if he's got to not be out there for 10 days. If you had to choose 10 days to miss, I guess it would be these 10 because you're kind of ramping up and kind of getting physically ready to go for training camp in the preseason. But we've seen this with rookies before where they pull a muscle or something happens and they just never quite get it figured out in time for the regular season. So I think it is a significant setback, or at least potentially could be, for Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah, it's like old school before the rookie salary cap and the slotting. It's like a holdout. It's like, no, you and I remember what that used to do to some of the rookies, you know. And that's the good news is, smart guy, but he's going to be playing catch up when he gets back.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it, is looking back to when you used to have holdouts. And the concern was always, you know, how much does it put this guy behind? And that's a real competition there. I mean, Mack Wilson, he knows that he's fighting for his kind of, maybe not his football life. He'll probably get jobs elsewhere, but he's fighting for his job here in Cleveland. Taki, the same thing. There's a lot of guys who are in here fighting for those jobs. And, you know, quite frankly, they're going to have an opportunity to get a leg up.
So do you think that a guy like Jacob Phillips has an advantage now? Is there like a pathway for him to take advantage of it?
I think there is. And I think there was a pathway for him to be a significant contributor even before this. But yeah, absolutely. This opens up an opportunity for him. You know, this is a guy that was working as the Mike linebacker a lot with the second team in the spring, at least when we were out there. And I think that's a way that they view him. But if you're going to get reps, I don't think you're going to be taking them away from Anthony Walker. I think he'll be on the field a lot. So you've got to be one of those outside guys. So this kind of puts one less guy in the way of Phillips. And if he can come out and hit the ground running, he's got an opportunity, him, Malcolm Smith, Taki, Mac Wilson, those 4 guys are all competing for that playing time alongside Walker.
All right, so Dog Pound Daily has 5 storylines to follow at training camp. First one, offensive line depth. What do you make of that?
I think that's a good one to bring up because, I think Jack Conklin is a guy that may miss a game or 2, right? That's kind of how it's been throughout his career. He's not Joe Thomas out there. He's probably not going to miss significant time, but you might have to replace him. Wyatt Teller, last year was the first year that he was really an everyday starter. And we saw there were some injury issues there, and he had to miss a little time. So you got to have depth there. You drafted James Hudson. If he can become your swing tackle, great. But they're going to have to find that interior guy. Nick Harris is on the roster. He's got to continue to establish himself as the backup center and potentially the center of the future. They're very durable on the inside with Treader and Bitonio. But those other guys, we just don't know if they're going to be able to play a full 17 games. So I think depth on the line is an important thing to keep an eye on for sure.
And you know what? Last year they were plugging guys in, in playoff games, and they were playing well. So points to them. All right, talent at the end of the roster. And again, this is a really, really deep roster.
But they also value churning the bottom of the roster. I think that's one of the things that Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry really value is this idea of, when you have guys at the end of the roster, that's sort of where you can bring guys in and develop them a little bit and kind of, find a guy that can contribute here or there. Maybe it's on special teams. Maybe it's on the defensive side of the ball here and there. Maybe it's a receiver, making 2 catches for you that really matter. I think the bottom of the roster, it'll be interesting because it is guys like, I don't know if you consider Kadero Hodge like a bottom of the roster guy, but he's going to be fighting for a job. I think Rashard Higgins is pretty safe. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is pretty safe. But I think what makes it interesting is, we're not talking about names people don't recognize. I think we're talking about guys who have contributed in the past. Malcolm Smith, for example, he's got to fight to make the 53. So I think that's a really interesting spot to watch because it's going to be names that people know from last year and maybe even a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's what happens with a good playoff team. It's that roster has been upgraded. All right, third on the list, integration of rookies, and this one's going to be really interesting just because of the rookie class that's coming in.
Yeah, and it's really those top 2 guys, and maybe Anthony Schwartz you throw into that mix as well. How do those guys all slide in and find their roles? Because, I mentioned James Hudson earlier. If he plays a lot, that's not good. You don't want to see a lot of James Hudson this year. Demetric Felton, I'm intrigued by him, but you don't want to have to rely on him, and you're so deep at running back. But, how do you bring Greg Newsome in? If he's not the starter, how do you find opportunities for him to play? Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who we talked about, if he's not the starter, how do you get him on the field, and then how do you expand his role? And then Anthony Schwartz is kind of the wild card in all that speed, but how do you fit him in with this crowded wide receiver core and get him reps?
Another thing that is on this list, the next one, the Baker-Odell connection. And again, that might be number 1.
Yeah, outside of the camp battles, it's probably what everyone's going to be watching. Are those 2 on the same page? And it might be hard to tell, until we get to real football games in September. But we're going to be watching how often those 2 connect. If they connect a bunch, there's going to be nothing but great stories. If they're, if Baker's throwing it over Odell's head or he's running a different route than Baker expected him to run, then there's going to be stories about that too. So this is going to be ongoing until these guys get to September and until we kind of see whether they actually are on the same page or not in real football games. But, outside of any camp battle that we can throw out there, I think this might actually be top of the list.
And the last one, and kind of comes back to what we mentioned, no guys on the physically unable to perform list. So how do the players who are coming back from injuries look?
And specifically Grant Delpit. That's a really interesting room because you've got John Johnson III. We know what his role is going to be. Just write it in pen. He's going to be your free safety. He is going to play in the box a little bit. There's a lot of things he can do. He's not competing for anything. I think Ronnie Harrison has a real chance. If Grant Delpit starts slowly or if Ronnie Harrison is just better, I think he's got a chance to be that second safety on the field. Now, we'll see all 3 safeties, But Grant Delpit's really the guy, if we're going to talk about guys coming back from injury, that everybody wants to see and everybody wants to watch. Grady Williams, I don't want to say that's his job to lose. I actually think Greg Newsome, if I had to pick a winner of that competition, I would say it's Greg Newsome. But let's see how Grady Williams comes back and competes. That's another guy that you kind of circle and say, all right, you basically lost last year. You got a front office that didn't draft you. How are you going to respond?
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. With training camp set to get underway tomorrow, we'll take a look at what the Browns need to get done at training camp and also what Dan's going to be watching day one at training camp. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns football with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. So, Dan, training camp gets underway tomorrow, probably the most anticipated training camp in Browns history, at least for a long, long time. What do they need to get done? What do you need to see during this camp to make you feel, all right, let's get the games going?
I think the first thing is what we've talked about. It's really just about getting through healthy. They've got to make sure that they aren't overtaxing guys. Back in 2019, one of the things that happened, I really think, was they were in pads all the time. And I think guys started to wear down, and I think that affected them. So, that's the first thing. Now, that's not really something you're watching, though. So I think for me, it's about Joe Woods' defense. And what is that going to look like? And how are guys all going to fit together in that defense? How much are we even going to see? The great thing about training camp is you've got to at least see something. They can't just hide everything. Practices are open. They've got to get stuff ready. They've got to play a game on September 12th. So, that's really kind of what I'm watching is that defensive line rotation, how they put those safeties on the field. I think that's the biggest thing to watch in this camp. And I think that's the biggest thing that they have to get done is make sure that defense is installed and ready to go for Kansas City.
Who is someone you can't wait to see actually doing football stuff then? So, that facet of what are you watching out on the practice field?
I'm going to go with a couple of rookies, and I'm going to go with a guy we've already talked about. And unfortunately, it's going to be a little while till we get to see him, but I really do want to see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I mean, this is supposed to be that new breed of linebacker that the Browns envision, a smaller guy, faster, athletic, and I want to see if he can check all of those boxes. I want to see him on a day with pads, and I don't know how physical this camp will be, but I want to see him on a day with pads or when they're going against the Giants in those joint practices. I want to see him take on a running back in the hole. Those are things you want to see out of him. How does he stand up to that kind of physical punishment? And the other guy is Anthony Schwartz. We just haven't gotten to see that speed. Rookie minicamp was pretty slow. He had the soft tissue injury. I want to see just how fast he looks in person. The great thing about training camp is we're on the field, we're at field level, and this is the best view that we're going to get of these guys as far as how fast they are, how big they are, all of that. And I want to see this world-class speed from Anthony Schwartz.
All right, let's shift focus just a little bit. So J.C. Tretter, Brown center, is also the Players Association president. He wrote kind of a public letter yesterday, and there were a couple things that were interesting in it. First and foremost, no changes to the protocols as far as COVID goes. They knew it was kind of a 2-year window, so they didn't need to go back and do that. Also wants vaccinated players to be tested more than they are talking about testing them. And then he was 100% against the wristband deal that would show vaccinated and unvaccinated players. When you looked at that, what did you take away from J.C. Tretter's letter out to the public?
I think he was really upset at the NFL and its messaging. And as much as that was for, a lot of us on the outside, I also think that was for a lot of the players too. I think when the NFL sent out that memo, it just rubbed a lot of players the wrong way because it seemed to put a lot of the onus on if games are canceled on them. And the NFL has been very aggressive with not mandating vaccines, but making it very clear that if you aren't vaccinated, you're going to have a very unpleasant experience. And I think J.C. Tretter, even though I'm sure he wants players to get vaccinated, he kind of wanted to pull that back a little bit and say, look, this isn't the NFLPA just going rogue and not listening to you guys and just doing whatever we want. This is the NFL trying to pressure people a little bit. And this is what we believe. These protocols aren't changing. We do want to get vaccinated players tested more often because of breakthrough cases. It was really just sort of taking control of that message back so that he doesn't get a bunch of players on social media or whatever kind of coming back at the NFLPA and not having the impression that the union doesn't have their back.
Yeah, and again, well stated by J.C. Tretter as far as his case. All right, Pro Football Focus has war-adjusted injuries lost, so it's for the team. So wins above replacement adjusted for injuries lost by team from a season ago. So it measures the impact of injuries at a team level. And for last year during the season, number 1, the Browns. Number 2, the Ravens. Number 3, the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about it. The Browns, they got hit with injuries. And it was not fun for them. And again, even some of that was the COVID issues with, Myles Garrett, with the game against the Jets, where they lost the receivers, almost all their receivers, to contact tracing, and it almost cost them a playoff berth. In the playoffs, even, they were dealing with injuries. Joel Bitonio didn't play. That wasn't an injury. That was COVID related, but he didn't play in that game. Jedrick Wills, I think a lot of people forget this. He left the Chiefs game really early, and he didn't return. They were even losing backups. Chris Hubbard, who was filling in at guard when they needed him, he suffered a serious injury. So, we didn't get to see the Browns at their healthiest last year. And Odell Beckham, we went through the list earlier. It's not surprising that they're so high on this list.
Yeah, and again, all 3 of those teams were playoff teams. And the Browns, won a playoff game. So, again, let's see if fortune can reverse it as far as the injuries go and they stay relatively healthy. Knock on wood here.
Yeah, but the other thing about the NFL is somebody's going to get hurt. Last year it was Odell Beckham tore his ACL. There's somebody on this roster who's going to lose their season for whatever reason. Nobody wants to see it, but it's just the way the NFL is. And there's 2 things that are completely out of your control in the NFL that could dictate how your season goes. And that's the schedule and that's injuries. And you've got to find a way to get through that stuff. And I think Kevin Stefanski is really good at that. I think he's really good at making sure players are just focused on this is what we have and this is how we're going to do it. And so I think they have the right guy in charge to kind of navigate some of this stuff that you just can't control in this league.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear what an ESPN national commentator thinks Odell Beckham Jr. means to the Browns. Let's take a look at the wide receiver depth projection and some guys who are going to have to fight their way onto this 53-man roster. Sports4CLE, you'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We continue talking Browns football. Dan Orlovsky from ESPN's Get Up had this to say about how important Odell Beckham Jr. is to the Browns.
It's a huge challenge. It's probably one of the biggest things. Once you establish yourself as a good player to really manage that relationship. I would say this. When Baker or the play call comes in and it's kind of geared towards trying to get OBJ the ball and it's not there, throw the ball to somebody else, turn to your coach and say, call a better play. Figure out a better play for you to get me the opportunity to get that guy the ball, because the best thing that I can do for our offense is to throw it to where the defense is not. You guys have all heard that saying, right? Take what the defense gives you. Well, sometimes they don't give you OBJ open, so that doesn't mean you force it. But it's hard because every day I used to have Reggie Wayne. I played with Reggie Wayne, and he used to walk by my locker, and every single time he walked by my locker, he would say, throw left. Reggie stayed on the left side of the field all game, and he would say, throw left, throw left, throw left, and eventually you'd come to line of scrimmage, or I would, and I'd be like, I'm just going to throw this ball to Reggie. And it would end up being a stupid decision at times, but you become so, you believe so much in their talent that you're like, I'm going to force it to him. Baker, that's his biggest challenge this year. You cannot allow that to enter into your mindset and impact the way you play the game.
So, Dan Labbe, what do you make of that?
It's been the story of Odell and Baker for the last 2 years. Does Baker try to force him the football too much? And, here's the reality that Baker Mayfield faces this year. It's not just Odell Beckham Jr. This team has so many weapons, and these guys are going to want the football. Jarvis Landry is going to want it. Kareem Hunt, when he's on the field, is going to want it. Nick Chubb, he's going to get the football plenty. I don't think they're going to have to worry about that. Austin Hooper, David Njoku, Rashard Higgins, Higgins and Njoku are in contract years. And it feels like Higgins is in a contract year every year. But, again, it's real this year for those two guys. A lot of guys are going to want the football on this team. And Baker Mayfield is going to have to hand it out and sort through that and deal with it. And the biggest one of all is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. And he's just going to have to show the maturity and understand that, Baker has control of this offense. He knows this offense. He knows how to distribute the football. And Odell is going to have to just trust that it's going to come his way when the time is right.
Winning cures a lot of those things for those guys too, though. All right, let's look at the wide receiver depth, and it's pretty significant. So conventional wisdom, you think 5 or maybe 6? What are you looking at as far as how many wide receivers make this team?
I think they might have to go above 5 to get everybody they want, because we know Jarvis and Odell are on the roster. I think this year, I just don't know that Rashard Higgins is going to be fighting for his roster spot. I think he is going to be on there. Donovan Peoples-Jones, sometimes we forget about him, but it's hard for me to think that they're going to cut Donovan Peoples-Jones or try to sneak him onto the practice squad. Kadarius Hodge is a guy they really like. He won that third receiver job last year. And I think had he stayed healthy, we might be having a very different discussion about Rashard Higgins, to be honest. So I think Darrell Hodge is a guy they really like. I think he's a guy that Mike Prefer really likes. So now you've got to get Anthony Schwartz on the roster. What do you consider Demetric Felton? Is he going to be on the roster as a running back or a wide receiver? I think 6 is the number. If they want to fit everybody they want on the roster, I think 6 is going to be the number.
And that means JoJo Natson, who, was a pretty good return guy, has to find a way to fight and earn a spot in there as well, because with what you named 6, and that it's a very crowded and deep roster, which again is great. All right, we're going to turn our attention to Madden rankings. They're coming out slowly, and we're going to begin with the spectacular catch rankings for the wide receivers. And you see DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham Jr. both with 99 ratings. Adams, Thielen, Diggs, Evans, Jones, and you see the rest of the top 10. Hard to argue with giving OBJ a highest ranking for the spectacular catch.
Yeah, and with a few of these guys, but especially those top 2, you can close your eyes and just think of at least one amazing catch that they've made. Everybody knows the Odell one that he made with the Giants, but fans who are going to be back at training camp this year, they're going to see him work on those one-handed catches, and he's going to make some spectacular ones. DeAndre Hopkins, I think everybody remembers that. I think it was Christmas Eve or Christmas Day catch he made over Joe Hayden a few years back when he was still with the Texans. It's not surprising to see Odell is still at the top of this list, because he can make, he makes the spectacular look easy. And what's funny is Jarvis Landry is kind of right there with him, at least when it comes to one-handed catches. He's made a lot of really tough one-handed grabs so far. It's fun to see those two guys at practice, and fans going to training camp. First thing you should do during warm-ups is find 80 and find 13, because they're going to try and put on a show.
The other thing, Madden speed rankings for wide receivers, and this one kind of opened my eyes a little bit. So Tyreek Hill, 99, I get that. Henry Ruggs at 98. You look down at the 6th spot, and Anthony Schwartz, who has, literally world-class speed, gets a 97. Where do they rank Usain Bolt in this one then, too? But a 97, that's a tough grade for Anthony Schwartz.
Oh, yeah, I'm a little surprised. This is a guy that was talking to us about maybe trying out for the Olympics at one point. To see him at 97. It's interesting, though, to look at this list, and I think it probably serves as, maybe a cautionary tale isn't the word, but just a reminder that, some of those guys, there's a little more to the game than speed, right? John Ross is incredibly fast, but he never stuck with Cincinnati, had some injury issues. Anthony Schwartz is going to have to develop a little bit and grow a little bit. I think this year there might be some ups and downs with him, but I think they'll find opportunities to really use that speed. But the key with Schwartz is how does he develop as a route runner and all of those things. And I think we're going to see him grow as the year goes on. And,
they may bring him along a little slowly. That could, in theory, potentially answer what you do with that wide receiver group if you need to, keeping in mind he's a rookie 3rd-round pick. All right, we're going to move on to the edge rushers, and this one's pretty good. The top-ranked edge rusher, according to Madden, Myles Garrett at a 98, so close to that 99 club. Khalil Mack comes in 2nd, and the Watt brothers 3rd and 5th, Chandler Jones sandwiched in between them. Hard to argue with Myles Garrett being the top-ranked edge rusher, though.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see him there. When you just look at the ability, take away the numbers, take away everything else, just look what he can do on the football field. He should be the highest ranked edge rusher on that list. And I think he's poised to have that year where he finally has a real shot to win Defensive Player of the Year as long as he stays healthy. The bad news for Baker Mayfield when you look at that list is once you get past Garrett, the Browns have to face all but 2 of those guys this season. So he's going to be facing some really talented players. But I do believe Myles Garrett belongs at the top of that list.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree. Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter, and I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear what a former Browns head coach thinks about the Browns being Super Bowl contenders. Also, some power rankings just released today. We'll tell you where the Browns are on that list. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns football. Former NFL head coach Eric Mangini on why he thinks the Browns are Super Bowl contenders this year.
I really like what I'm hearing from Cleveland, and it's so different than the last time they went to the playoffs and they had success. They're talking about managing expectations. They're talking about running their race. It's humble. It's understanding that you don't get to start where you finish. It's so radically different than the last time they had success. And you hear Baker talking about the importance of leadership and chemistry. It's so different than worrying about what the media is saying about him or his haters or whatever other issues he used to get caught up in. And even in Odell's voice, he's not talking about, I need to make 100 plays. He just wanted to make one play. And that chemistry, that selflessness, that willing to sacrifice, that perspective, to me, that's the mark of a team that's maturing.
Dan, I agree. I agree with everything Eric Mangini said, and I think that's from the perspective of a head coach.
Yeah, and maturing is the right word. And Mangini's a guy who, has obviously coached teams. He coached the Jets. I believe took them to the playoffs one year, and obviously Browns fans remember what happened here. But also was, with Bill Belichick in New England, and he knows what a championship team looks like, and he knows what it's supposed to sound like and how they're supposed to approach it. And maturity is the key word. And the other thing he said there is Kevin Stefanski has made it clear. What happened last year, and now it's on to this year. And like he said, you don't get to just pick up where you left off. Every season is different. Even Andrew Berry was saying that when we talked to him way back in January. Every season is different. You've got to clear the deck and just start over. And that's how the Browns are approaching this season. And I think messaging is really important. And Kevin Stefanski is really good at it, both publicly, but also I think with his players.
So Bleacher Report has come out with power rankings, and Buccaneers are 1, Chiefs are 2. That's not surprising. Bills are number 3, Browns are 4, Packers, who will have Aaron Rodgers, are 5, and the Ravens are 6. I'm somewhat surprised the Bills are that high, but the Browns are also probably a little higher as well.
Yeah, the Bills are getting a lot of love this offseason. I think people do believe they're going to make that leap to the elite. I really like what they did last year. I really like Josh Allen. I just, I don't know if I'm quite ready to put them that high. I guess I consider them in the same class as the Browns and look, the Ravens too. I think with those 3 teams, you could put them in any order and make a convincing case that that's how it belongs. You could say, well, the Browns didn't beat the Ravens last year. They need to beat the Ravens before I'm going to put them ahead of them. That's fair. You could just say the Browns are more talented. I think there's a real case to be made there. And then with the Bills, if you want to say that, I think Josh Allen is going to complete 70% of his passes again and be great again, that's why you put him that high. If you kind of want to wait and see to make sure he's actually that good, I think that's fair too. So, it's certainly not a hot take. I think you could put those teams in any order and make a really convincing case for it.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. All right, so NFL.com projects the most improved player on each AFC team. I'm kind of scratching my head at this one. Grant Delpit. I don't really have much to judge him by. He was supposed to be really good as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, if you're starting from zero, I guess there's no place to go but up. That one was a little strange. It felt like a little bit of a reach. If you're thinking most improved player, what about a guy we mentioned earlier in like Jacob Phillips? Maybe he's the most improved. A guy that's hard to quantify, Jedrick Wills. He was really good as a rookie, but I think there's room for improvement. What if he takes a leap and really puts himself in that discussion among some of the top tackles in the game? I think that's a guy that I would look at. I think Grant Delpit, maybe a little bit of the easy way out on this, but certainly, look, if he comes out and he establishes himself as a starter and is the player they expected, then sure. But based on what happened last year when he didn't even play, he's going to be the most improved. Yeah,
and again, Browns were expecting big things for him before he got hurt. And again, it's great to hear that he's not starting in the year on the physically unable to perform list. He's full go. All right, before I let you go, training camp gets underway tomorrow. Some under-the-radar position battles. So I'm not going to let you say Greedy Williams and Greg Newsome, because we know that's going to be kind of 1A as far as the battles go. What are some of the under-the-radar battles that you think are going on out in Berea during training camp?
The one I keep looking at is that Delpit Harrison. I think that's a real battle. I think that's just one to kind of circle and say, maybe Ronnie Harrison wins that job. Because remember, when they drafted Grant Delpit, Ronnie Harrison wasn't here. And so those two never really directly competed. And I just want to see how that shakes out. We mentioned offensive line depth. I guess that's one to watch is sort of who steps up as your swing tackle, your interior help on the offensive line. Those obviously aren't real exciting battles to watch. How about defensive tackle? You got Malik Jackson, you've got Andrew Billings. I think Malik Jackson probably ends up starting there, but I think beyond that, nothing is guaranteed because you have Jordan Elliott. You've got Malik McDowell, who's kind of a wild card in all of this, super talented, but has never actually played a game in the NFL because of off-field issues and injury issues. So he's really intriguing. There's some guys on that interior of the line that I think there's going to be a real battle there for who ends up as those starting two to replace Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi.
What do you think about the third wide receiver? So you've got kind of Rashard Higgins, Hodge, who won it a year ago, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz. I mean, the third wide receiver, I'm just kind of looking at going, if Anthony Schwartz finds a way to win that and has the type of camp he's capable of, that could be very, very interesting for this offense.
I think that battle is huge. I think a lot of people just kind of look at Rashard Higgins and say, okay, he's the third receiver. And look, the production he had last year merits him getting real playing time. But I think there's going to be a fight for who gets the most playing time there. And it might be the matchup game. There might be some weeks where you want Anthony Schwartz's speed. And there might be some weeks where you want Rashard Higgins just kind of knowing where he's supposed to be, where you want Hodges' speed. There's a lot of different body types. Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably the biggest guy in that room, and that makes him intriguing. I think, that's definitely a battle that we're going to keep an eye on, that third and fourth receiver and who the Browns really start to trust in those positions, because sometimes that's what it comes down to. Who does Baker trust and who does the coaching staff trust?
I lied. I got one more for you. How important and how closely are you going to watch what they do special teams-wise? Because with good teams, inevitably, there's going to be one or two games that come down to, field position, a punt that you return, a punt that you pin people back, a field goal that you make. How important are special teams, and how much do they need to improve for the Browns to get where they want to go?
I think it's huge. And, Mike Prefer, we talk about Joe Woods. It's like Joe Woods on the hot seat. And I don't know if that's entirely fair based on what he had to work with last year, but it is a prove-it year for him. It might kind of be a prove-it year for Mike Prefer because the special teams weren't great last year. So outside of like the kicking battle and maybe how Jamie Gillen looks, we talk about the bottom of the roster. That's a way that a Kaderil Hodge could separate himself. He can cover punts. He's a really reliable gunner, and Mike Prefer really likes him. So that's a way that he can separate himself. At the cornerback position, Tavier Thomas was a core special teamer. They let him go. So now there's an opportunity for a cornerback like an A.J. Green or someone like that down the roster who can show Mike Prefer and Kevin Stefanski, I can contribute on special teams. That's your way to get on this 53-man roster. So it can be hard to watch sometimes at camp. And sometimes when Mike Prefer starts yelling and the special teams come on the field, everybody starts looking at their phones. But it's probably a good idea to pay attention to who's out there, who he seems to trust, and who could sneak onto this roster because of what they can do on special teams.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it very much.
Yep, anytime. Thank you.
All right, Dan Labbe, make sure you read them. Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. They will be out there covering training camp. We're going to take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our attention to the NBA draft and the Cavs. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Sports4CLE continues. We shift our focus to the Cavs getting ready to make the third overall pick, or at least we think they will, in the draft coming up in a couple of days. Let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Sam, what are you hearing about Cavs? Any of the draft rumors true, and what are you hearing with the Cavs in the NBA draft?
There is no shortage of talk and rumors with that number 3 pick. We've heard everybody from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the New York Knicks to the Golden State Warriors to the Toronto Raptors, who have the 4th pick. All of them have supposedly called the Cavs to gauge interest in that number 3 pick, asking what it'll take to move up. This really is a draft that's kind of viewed as, while deep, the top 3 guys in Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley from USC, and Jalen Green from the G League. Those 3 guys are supposed to be 3 real impact players right away and long term. So everybody would like to move up to get one of those 3. But the Cavs are very hesitant in any kind of those conversations and moving out of that spot or moving back. So right now it seems like, despite all the rumors and all the buzz, they will probably end up sticking at number 3.
And it really doesn't make sense because that's what they lack. You view those 3 as potential cornerstones, and who knows how that's going to play out. But that's what the Cavs need, that number 1 option that, when the game's on the line, you can go to. And there's a reason not many drafts have 3 of them. Some don't even have 1. So if you have one of those guys in your sights, you kind of hold on to that.
That's exactly what they're thinking, is that you want to find a guy who's going to push you not only, if not into playoff contention, at least in contention to the play-in tournament. So that means one of the top 10 seeds in the East. You want to be in that 10-11 range. If you're the Cavs, that's the next logical step. And really, 3 of those guys are potentially one of those guys who could do that, whether it's you assume Cade Cunningham's going to go first to the Pistons, and then the Cavs are going to have left to choose whoever's left between Jalen Green or Evan Mobley. A lot of mock drafts and a lot of insiders are saying that it's going to be Mobley. 7-footer from USC, reminds a lot of people of Chris Bosh. The way he can step out on the floor, has a nice mid-range game, tons of athleticism, pretty good, pest near the rim defensively. So, and the Cavs like the idea of putting him at the 4 next to Jared Allen at the center and trying to make that work. And, in a lot of places it might not work, but with Mobley being the kind of guy who can play and defend power forwards, it could work very well.
So if they have Allen and Mobley on the court together, do you think that allows them to play potentially Sexton and Garland together? Because, those are two pretty good rim protectors, you would assume. And, the concern with Garland and Sexton, they're a little vertically challenged, we'll say, because you and I are both short guys, that they can be defensive liabilities.
Yeah, there's defensive issues. There's questions about, as wonderful as Colin Sexton is as a scorer, is he, where is he as a distributor? Really, the Cavs say he's a shooting guard, but the truth is they play 2 point guards, as you said, in stature, both Garland and Sexton, 6'1" range. And Garland's more of a true point guard. We've heard all the talk that they've made Colin Sexton available. Right now, they're not getting anywhere with that. They're not pushing it. They've just kind of let it be known, hey, if you have an offer for Colin Sexton, we're going to be willing to listen. And so far, those offers have not been real great, but that could change come free agency or closer to the season once teams start getting their rosters a little more set. So, the worst case scenario is you keep Sexton, and that's not a bad thing to do, and let him continue to develop with Garland. The issue is you're going to have to pay Colin Sexton here. He's probably the biggest name up for his rookie scale extension. He's going to want a lot of money, and rightfully so. The Cavs have made him the number one option and the face of the franchise since LeBron James left. So there's a lot of things going on there with Colin Sexton. On the basketball court, could Garland and Sexton, a guy like Mobley, assist them defensively? Absolutely. Mobley and Allen back there protecting the basket would compensate for those smaller guards. And Isaac Okoro, who really is a small forward and still learning, how to play defense at the NBA level.
When you look at and this is just your gut feeling, there's some talk that the Cavs are trying to get another top 10 pick. Do you think that's likely? If so, what would it take? Who do you think they're targeting to get that other top 10 pick?
Well, you look at those three teams that I mentioned, the Raptors at number 4 are really looking to move out of that spot and really kind of return. They just won a championship 2 years ago. Then the next season they missed the playoffs entirely. So or 2 seasons later, they missed the playoffs entirely. They're really looking to get back into contention. And they feel like they have most of the pieces. If the Raptors can't find a veteran player, so they would be a candidate for a Colin Sexton. If they can't find that type of player, then they would probably be more willing to liquidate the roster, move Siakam, Pascal Siakam, who obviously is an all-star power forward, and kind of gut things and rebuild. So the Raptors would be a great candidate as somebody who might move that number 4 pick. If you're the Cavs, though, you don't really necessarily want to move back in the draft. You want to keep that number 3 and try to get another one. The Warriors obviously have no desire to add a bunch of rookies to the team, and they have the number 7 and 14 pick with Klay Thompson returning and supposedly James Wiseman, their center from last year, being healthy. Those guys coming in, the Warriors want to try to make another run at it. So they would be more than happy to liquidate themselves of that number 7 pick. Again, they also have number 14. So those two teams, to me, would be the primary teams. Oklahoma City, I think, is exploring a lot of things. They have called the Cavs. They have the number 6 pick. I think that's possible. They have 6, 16, and 18. I don't think that the Thunder want to keep all 3 of those. So maybe the Cavs won't get another top 10 pick, but I think it's very realistic they could end up somewhere in the 15 to 20 range with a second pick as well as the number 3.
Any names to keep an ear out for that you think would fit that the Cavs might be looking at with that pick mid or even at that 6 to 10 range or middle of the first round?
So much of what happens or what that would consist of in the 6 to 15 range. Even there's so many guards and small forwards available there and they're all considered pretty talented, but they're all kind of jumbled together. You know, you hear names like Scotty Barnes from Florida State, who is kind of a tweener forward, can play both small and power. You hear names like Keon Johnson, the guard forward from Tennessee. You hear James Bonite, the shooting guard from Connecticut. All of those type of players really are almost positionless in that range. And it's hard to tell what the Cavs might be looking for with somebody like that. They could turn around and trade one of those picks if they get them too, use as part of a Sexton package or something like that. But there's just so many talks and so much buzz going on. If you ever saw the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt playing the role of Billy Beane, like answering the phone, putting a guy on hold, answering another phone, that is probably what Kobe Altman looks like right now and will all the way up until Thursday's NBA draft.
Sam Amico from hoopswire.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll talk a little trade, who the Cavs might be looking to trade for, what it might cost. Sports4CLE will be right back. We're talking Cavs and NBA basketball draft just a couple nights away.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Cavs basketball with Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. So, Sam, let me put this out there. Is there a chance that the Cavs could still make a deal for Ben Simmons of the Philadelphia 76ers?
Absolutely. They're involved in those talks, have been involved, not given up on that idea. Simmons is widely available. That'd be a stunner if he's back in Philly next season. And, the Sixers are just weighing offers. There was a report yesterday from the Philadelphia Inquirer that, as I said about Sexton earlier, the odds are Simmons would probably be moved closer to the season. Again, it just gives teams an opportunity to see what their rosters are like and what they still need to add and what they want to add and how they can add it. And I fully expect the Cavs to be involved in that. To me, it's just a matter of, do the Sixers want Colin Sexton? Because he would certainly be involved in that trade. You would think the Cavs don't want to give up Darius Garland, and the Sixers would want a guard in return. So the natural assumption is that it would be Colin Sexton. I think that, you just have to, if you're the Sixers, you have to weigh other teams' offers, but the Cavs are certainly going to make an offer and probably continue to do so. The good news for them is if they really want Ben Simmons, Sixers executive of basketball operations, Daryl Morey's a Medina Highland grad and grew up a Cavs fan. So maybe that will help facilitate a deal. But sure, they're involved in that. They're probably looking at some other players as well. They would love to add a veteran star, get the fans excited, get some buzz going. So I think that possibility exists. But Simmons in particular is a player that they are targeting.
Okay, let's put it this way. Do you think Sexton, Kevin Love, because you have to make the dollar figure matchup, so Love would probably be included in that as well. I guess you could sign Sexton to an extension and do a sign trade. But do you think Sexton, Love, and a future number one that might be top 5 protected would get it done?
It could potentially get it done. It just depends on what other offers they are out asking for the Sixers. Everything I hear, they want an all-star guard in return. Sexton, obviously not being an all-star yet, but certainly has that potential. Maybe could shine on a winning team like the Sixers. Certainly wouldn't be afraid to shoot in the fourth quarter and could shoot free throws better than Ben Simmons. The questions with Sexton, if you're the Sixers, are going to be, how much are we going to have to overcompensate for him defensively? The Sixers have some fine defenders in Thibault and Danny Green, obviously Embiid. So I would think that the possibility exists that if the Sixers don't get, somebody like a De'Aaron Fox from the Kings, who I've heard is completely unavailable, that they might go in the direction of a Colin Sexton. The Sixers are talking to like 4 or 5 teams right now. They've been most actively talking to the Raptors, but the Cavs are in on that. So I think the possibility exists. The problem with, you would want to throw in Kevin Love, but the problem is he really kind of hurt his trade value by having to withdraw from Team USA. And now, opposing teams are thinking, hey, you know what? He just needs to be rejuvenated, come to our place, play alongside some stars. And now they're having doubts about even that, because, he's got a big contract still with 2 years and, $60 million left. That's a big gamble. So I think that the possibility exists, yes, that the Cavs could end up with Ben Simmons, but I wouldn't call it a long shot. I'd call it a medium shot. I would say some other teams have a better shot at landing Simmons than the Cavs do.
The other thing that we've heard is that the Raptors are interested in Jarrett Allen. Well, that kind of makes sense. What do you think the price, what could the Cavs potentially get? Because it would likely be a sign and trade that can match any offer. So what do you think the Cavs get in something that sends Jarrett Allen to the Raptors?
Now, that's something I would call a long shot, that Jarrett Allen going to Toronto. I think the Cavs would be, content just to match whatever offer the Raptors gave him and keep him, unless it was astronomical. If that were the case, the Cavs obviously would want a center or two back, or at least a center and another big back. To me, it's hard to speculate just because the Raptors have so much going on. They're probably going to lose Kyle Lowry. They've made Siakam available. They're trying to move the number 4 pick. I think that Jarrett Allen is something that's kind of like on their radar, or someone who's on their radar, but not, somebody that they're really going to overly pursue, simply because, all they probably would be doing is driving up the asking price for the Cavs. Now, if it turns out again that once free agency comes around in early August and they make some moves and they decide, you know what, we do need a big man, and they've been after Jarrett Allen for a while, dating back to when he was with the Nets, then yes, potentially they could give him a lot of money, and more money than the Cavs want to pay Jarrett Allen. So what they could get back, it's hard to say because you don't know what his salary is, but they would certainly be looking for one of the Raptors' primary big guys, which at that point the Raptors would be willing to surrender.
All right, before I let you go, some veterans to listen out for that you think the Cavs could add in the offseason.
Well, we keep hearing the name Doug McDermott from the Pacers, T.J. McConnell from the Pacers. The Pacers are probably only going to keep one or the other of those guys, and it's probably going to be McConnell because McDermott is coming off a great season, a very, very underrated season, and he may have priced himself out of what the Pacers are looking to do. Another team there that's in on the Ben Simmons talks. The Cavs do not just want to add a bunch of young players. They do want to add some veterans. And McDermott fits that bill. He's a guy who come off your bench, give you quality minutes. open up the floor a little bit in terms of his ability to score, does some underrated things defensively. So that's a name that's really been linked to the Cavaliers. We hear names like Alex Caruso, the Lakers point guard, who's a free agent, depending on what else the Cavs do, but you've got to fill out that bench with some veterans. You're obviously losing Matthew Dellavedova. You don't know how available Kevin Love is going to be, assuming, he probably will be back because they won't be able to move him. So guys like McDermott, TJ McConnell, Alex Caruso, all of those guys are in the Cavs price range. I'm sure that there's probably 7 or 8 other guys out there that are like those players that are just veterans who are going to come in and make the right play off the bench, help push the young guys, because the Cavs are going to have, even if they were to trade Sexton, even if they land Ben Simmons, they're still going to have a very young core and a pretty young bench. So you need to find a way to get some of those older voices in there, and not just voices, but guys who could actually come into games and produce.
Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Sam, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and keep an eye on that number 3 pick. It should be an exciting draft. If nothing else, it'll be full of buzz.
That's right. Cavs can get a building block, too. Sam Amico. Remember, hoopswire.com. You can read Sam, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. Scheduled guests tomorrow, Mac Robinson and Kevin Arnold. That's tomorrow at 4. Until then, have a great night, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow at 4 here on Sports4CLE.